Have you recently lost your job and feeling lost? It's a situation no one wants to find themselves in, but it's a reality many face. Let's explore this journey through the eyes of an everyday hero, John. John is like many of us. He had a job he was proud of, a role that gave him a sense of identity, purpose, and security. But one day, unexpectedly, it all came to a halt. John lost his job. The initial reaction to this unexpected job loss is often one of shock and denial. It's a jolt to the system, an abrupt disruption of what we've known and what we've built. This is the first stage of grief that John, like many others, goes through. John wakes up the next morning convinced that it must have been a bad dream. He gets ready for work, just like any other day. He even reaches out to his former colleagues, thinking there's been some misunderstanding. But the reality is inescapable. His job is gone. This disbelief is a natural reaction. Our minds, in an attempt to cushion the blow, create a protective barrier, a temporary bubble where the harsh reality hasn't yet set in. It's like the calm before the storm, a brief respite before the waves of emotions come crashing down. John finds himself in this bubble of disbelief, convincing himself that there's been a mistake. It's a coping mechanism, a way to buy some time before the full force of reality sets in. But as the days pass, the protective bubble starts to burst, and reality seeps in. As the dust settles and the shock wears off, John comes to terms with the fact that he has indeed lost his job. The disbelief slowly fades, and the reality of his situation becomes clear. It's at this point that John, like many of us, moves into the next stage of grief. It's a normal part of the process, a necessary step on the road to recovery. Let's remember that it's okay to feel shocked. It's okay to feel disbelief. You're not alone in this journey. John, like many of us, was angry about his job loss. Anger is often the next step in grief. You see, anger often follows on the heels of denial, as the harsh reality of the situation begins to sink in. John found himself brimming with anger, his emotions directed towards his former employer, the fluctuating economy, or even himself. It's a natural response, a defense mechanism against the pain of loss. Then, as the flames of anger begin to subside, John found himself in the bargaining stage. It's a phase of what-ifs and if-onlys. John started replaying his actions, wondering if he could have done something differently to keep his job. He thought, what if I'd worked harder, or if only I'd been more proactive? But remember, bargaining is often an attempt to regain control over an uncontrollable situation. After the anger subsides and the bargaining ends, John enters the next stage of grief, which is depression. Depression sets in as John faces the reality of his job loss. With the shock and anger behind him, John now finds himself in a profound state of sadness. This is the depression stage, where feelings of emptiness and despair dominate. It's a natural response to a great loss, an emotional low after the highs of anger and bargaining. In this stage, John might feel numb, as if he's living in a fog. He might lose interest in things he once enjoyed, feeling as though there's no point. His thoughts might circle around the what-ifs and the if-onlys, the opportunities missed, the plans that can no longer come to fruition. The weight of his job loss bears down on him, rendering his world colorless and his future uncertain. But as time passes, something begins to shift within John. The fog slowly starts to lift. He begins to see his job loss not as an ending, but as a new beginning. He starts to understand that his worth is not tied to his job, that he is more than his career. The loss, while painful, has also opened up a world of possibilities he hadn't considered before. This marks the acceptance stage. Acceptance doesn't mean that John is okay with what happened. Rather, it means he acknowledges the reality of his job loss and starts to adjust to his new normal. He begins to make plans for the future, to explore new opportunities. He sees that while one door has closed, many others have opened. These stages of grief, depression, and acceptance are not linear. John may oscillate between them, feeling hopeful one moment and desolate the next. That's okay. Grief is a journey, not a destination, and like all journeys, it takes time. Just as John has gone through these stages of grief, so can you, and remember, there's always hope. If you've gone through a similar experience or have tips to share, please leave them in the comments section below. Together, we can help each other navigate through these challenging times.